why you didn't get the job. Hopefully I can help you. A lot of people are wondering about this, especially younger people, especially people that, don't have a lot of experience applying for jobs and doing this, right? You send out a lot of applications and you don't hear back and you wonder what the hell is going on. Is there something really wrong with me? Maybe I should go jump off a cliff, right? This is the standard thing. Okay, let's get into it. Why didn't you get the job? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to talk about the job search process. We're going to talk about if you failed the application stage where you sent in an application, but you did not get an interview. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about if you got an interview, but you failed that stage, meaning that you didn't get an offer or you didn't get a second interview, whatever comes next in their process. Okay. And finally, we're going to talk about if you made it all the way to the offer stage where they made you an offer, but it was rescinded for some reason. Maybe you tried to negotiate, or something, and you didn't hear back, or they rescinded it outright, and you didn't get the job. We're going to talk about that stage too. So it's going to be sort of 3 stages. Okay. And before we even start, I'm just going to mention the psychological component a little bit, because that's kind of a big deal to most people. We're all humans, and this is probably why you're wondering this stuff. It's the psychological side, right? Okay, so briefly, I'll just say this. Okay. Rejection stings. It stings for everyone. This is universal. And if you're looking for a job and you're doing the job search process, you are going to get a lot of rejection. Everyone does. I don't care how brilliant you are. I don't care how many jobs you've had and how many times you've done this. You are going to get rejected a lot. You are going to get rejected for jobs that you are 100% qualified for. Okay? Get used to this. This is how this process goes. Okay? It's not a matter of, oh, I'm qualified, therefore I shouldn't be rejected. That's not how this works, okay? That's what you're going to find. You don't have to take my word for this. But if you're experiencing that, okay, this is normal in the sense that it happens to everyone and it happens a lot, okay? So, the first thing I'd have to say is, if you have ever worked in sales, you would understand this process more, because the way sales works is you throw stuff at the wall and some of it sticks and most of it doesn't. Okay? Imagine if you had a job where you're going door to door, would you like, and then you get the door slammed in your face, right? The nature of that job is that you might knock on 100 doors and you get 5 sales. Okay, that's the nature of it. Now, 95% of the time, you get rejected. It's a no. Sometimes it's a very polite no. Sometimes it's a very rude no, but it's a no, okay? But that's okay, because on average, 5% of the time, you make a sale. And all you really need is 5%, right? So it just comes with the territory. This is kind of the same thing. The way job search works is that, you look far and wide, you apply to all kinds of different stuff. Some stuff, it appears to be a shoo-in, you're perfectly qualified for. It's maybe a job you've done the exact same job before, but, you get rejected for that. There are other jobs, maybe it's a bit of a stretch. You've never worked in that job before. You have some of the skills they say they're looking for, but you apply anyway, you get rejected for that too, right? Okay, so you're going to get a lot of rejection. That's just normal. And all you really need is one job, okay? So if you get rejected for 10 jobs, 100 jobs, 1,000 jobs, 10,000 jobs, it kind of doesn't matter as long as you get one when you need it, okay? So if you had a salesperson going door to door and they knocked on their first door and the person behind that door said no, and the salesman took it so badly that they took off their tie or whatever, if you can get a tie around your neck They took off their tie, they threw it away, and they said, that's it. You know, I'm no good at this. I'll never be any good at this. What's the use of even trying? And they gave up and quit their job as a salesperson. Would that be the right thing to do? No, because if they persisted and did 100, they would get those 5 sales, and each sale would be, say, I don't know, $1,000. It would be like a big deal. And that's all you need. Okay? So you got to keep at this for a little. You can't control your feelings. All you can control is your actions. So you got to take care of your mental health. This is what I would personally recommend. Okay? If you feel rejected, if you've just been rejected from these jobs, go home, do something fun that evening. Okay, like force yourself to watch your favorite TV show or read your favorite book or surround yourself with your favorite people. You know, just do whatever you need to do to feel better. I live in a very cold climate. I live in Winnipeg, Canada. It gets very dark here. It gets very cold here, especially in the winter. Put on some bright lights, put on your sweater, turn up the heat. Whatever stuff you need to do that makes you feel a little bit better about things, okay? Figure out what those are and do them. Okay, don't just wallow in it because you are going to get rejected a lot. Just get used to it, okay? But everyone does. You're not abnormal. You're perfectly normal, okay? Play video games, play sports, whatever it is. Force yourself to do it so that you just feel a little bit better about things, and then you get up the next day and you try again, okay? That's what I recommend. The biggest factor in why you were rejected across the board is random chance. Okay, I'll say that because imagine 100 people apply for a job. They can only give the job to one person. 99 people are going away with a no. So that means statistically, you've got a 1% chance of getting that job. If 400 people apply, you've got a 0.25% chance of getting that job statistically. That's just how this stuff works. The way you succeed is you apply for many jobs and you do the best job you can doing it. Okay? Right. Now let's get into this. We're going to talk about the 3 stages. The first stage is if you failed the application process. That means you applied, but you did not get an interview. Let's talk about that. Okay? Once again, the most likely thing that happened here is simply statistical probability. 400 people applied, 399 were going to get a no, and they could only hire one person. Even if they wanted to hire more than one, they met a bunch of people, they thought, wow, these people are all good. They could still only hire one, so 399 of the 400 are going away with a no, and you were one of the 399. Was it because you weren't qualified? Absolutely not. It's because it's just statistical probability, right? That's the most likely reason that you did not get an interview, okay? The second most likely reason, in my opinion, okay, this is where we get into other reasons. The second one is that the recruiter just is ignorant of what is qualified, okay? One annoying aspect of job search, if you're dealing with recruiters, is that in most cases, recruiters themselves, they're not qualified in the job that they're hiring for. So therefore, their sort of opinion of which candidate would be more qualified than which other candidate is usually out to lunch. Okay? That's usually what you're up against here. It's a crapshoot. Sometimes you get a good recruiter that has a clue of how this stuff works, but a lot of times you don't, okay? That's just the reality. So you could be perfectly qualified, but for whatever reason, their opinion of what qualified looks like differs from what you have. That's not your fault. You are qualified for it. It's just that these people are out to lunch. Okay? Now think of it this way. Would you really want to work for these clowns if they don't really understand anything about the job and they're hiring all the wrong people based on it? Probably not. But that is a thing that happens behind the scenes. Okay? The third reason, okay, that is the reason why you were rejected is some type of political thing going on behind the scenes. This is very, very common too. Okay. Now, under this umbrella of political stuff, you have things like they have an internal candidate that they're thinking of promoting, but for whatever reason, they're looking externally also. Sometimes it's legitimate. Sometimes they're honestly looking to see, is there any external candidate that, is that rivals our internal candidate that could be better, right? They're honestly looking for that. Other times it's really political and they're just going through the motions of pretending that they're looking externally when they're really not. Their mind is closed to they're hiring their internal candidate. And you just walked into that. There's no way to detect it. There's no way to see this from the outside. That was just what was happening behind closed doors on the other side of the table. Okay? So you walked in. There's nothing you can do. You did nothing wrong, but that was what was going on. Okay? You could have been the most qualified person. You could have been more qualified than their internal candidate, but their mind was already made up. People were friends with other people, right? You walk into it. Okay? Can't help that, right? The reality is that just like you have the freedom to work anywhere you choose or not work anywhere you choose, you can quit. They have the freedom to hire who they want, especially if it's a private company that's not taking money from the government for any reason, right? They can hire who they want, just like you can work anywhere you want, right? I mean, both sides have legitimate cases here. It just didn't work out. It was just not the right situation, okay? Nothing you can do about that. There's also more insidious stuff that can happen there too. For example, it could be a fake job. Okay, they posted a job and they said, we're hiring for this position and we're looking for someone who's got this, but that's false. They're not actually hiring. There isn't actually a position available. It's all an illusion. It's all, if you want to be harsh, you could call it a scam, because it kind of is. And it's just an excuse for them to do labor market research to see who's out there, who's looking for a job right now, what types of people are looking for a job, how easily are these people to find, how many of them are there, right? Sometimes it's a little bit more legitimate. They're saying, we're trying to cover our bases because if we have a star employee that quits, we want to be able to replace them very fast. And if we already kind of know who's out there that's qualified, we can immediately bring them in, right? So, I mean, I'm not defending them, but I'm saying that does happen sometimes. Okay, so it could be a ghost job, right? That's another thing that's real. But to summarize, the most likely reason is simply statistical probability. There's nothing nefarious going on. It's just that 400 people applied. That means 399 are going away with a no, and that includes perfectly qualified people like yourself. Okay, maybe it was a first come, first serve thing, or maybe, the recruiter lost the first 100 applications and then they started looking at application number 101 onwards and you were in application number 99, something like that. There's no way of knowing, but that's the most likely reason. Okay, now what can you do if this is the situation you're in? Here's what I would say. Okay, number one, make sure that when you're, first of all, make sure you're customizing your resume. People hate hearing that. They really do. They don't want to hear that they have to customize their resume to every job because that's a hell of a lot of work, right? I know this, and I know you know it too, but it is so ineffective to have like a just sort of general resume that you use for every job, especially when you're dealing with jobs that aren't at the management level. They're like at, work professional level or worker level, your entry level, right? You're going through recruiters. Recruiters are very fickle. They want the exact words that they used, right? So, so make sure you're customizing your resume, and when you customize it to using the same words that were used in the job posting to describe the qualifications. Okay, so if they said we're looking for a motorized forklift driver, you might think that's stupid. Nobody calls it that. It's a forklift. It's not a motorized forklift. It's a forklift. So you put forklift driver on your resume. Well, that's not what they wanted to hear. They wanted to see if you were a motorized forklift driver, because they're dealing with an idiot recruiter that doesn't understand that a motorized forklift is the same thing as a forklift. They didn't know this, so they insist on only looking at candidates that have motorized forklift in their resume, right? So they would have rejected you out of hand if you had just said forklift without saying motorized forklift. Stupid, but that's what we find, right? You got to match their words. Keyword matching, that's what that's called. Okay? Use their terms, their lingo. Another reason or another thing that you can do that will help you in this situation, that could possibly be the reason why you were rejected, was the risk aversion element. It wasn't the qualification side of things. It was the risk side of things. Now, maybe in your resume, it discloses that you've got a work gap, or maybe you've got, you've been job hopping. You take a job and then 2 months later, you take another job, and then 2 months later, you take another job. That can tip them off as a red flag, right? So you would try and minimize that stuff on your resume. Okay? If you suspect that one of those things is maybe the reason why you're being rejected, try a couple of applications that fix that don't include all the jobs in the job hopping thing, or that don't, put all the, you're kind of unclear about the dates on stuff if, you're self-conscious about a work gap, something like that, just to see if you get different results. Okay, that's what I'd recommend. Maybe you put your salary expectations right on the application. Maybe they demand that you have a salary requirement that they need to know, and that's pricing you out of the market. Okay, maybe try lowering that just for the application. You can always renegotiate that later, but maybe start adjusting how you answer that question, just to see if that you start to get different results. Okay. What else would there might be under that risk thing? Maybe your experience is too diverse. You were a cook for 2 years, and then you were a plumber for 2 years, and then you were an auto mechanic for 2 years, and then you were an insurance salesman for 2 years. They look at this on your resume and they're like, you got the qualifications, but you got a lot of other things on here that really don't apply. And the way they look at it is they look at that as a negative. And they say it's diluting the fact that you do have what we're looking for, but you've also got all this other stuff that we don't need. So I'm sorry, you're overqualified, or you're not a good fit, right? So you can experiment with that. Take stuff off that's really not relevant. The only reason that would be on there a lot of times is because of the human ego. We're proud of it. We want it known that we have this. Well, if that's counting against you, you might want to experiment with removing it and seeing if things change. Okay? I'm just saying. Okay, but if you're not getting interviews, that's the likely reason, and this is kind of a general idea of what to maybe do about it. Okay? Let's move on to the second stage. Let's say you're getting interviews, but you get an interview, but then they don't call you back. So you either don't get an offer, or you don't get a second interview, or whatever the process happens to be after the first interview, you're not going any further. Okay, so let's talk about that situation. Okay, why could you be rejected after doing an interview? What's the most likely reason here? Okay, first of all, the thing I said about statistical probability, that applies to pretty much every stage, okay? So that's usually the most likely reason. They will interview usually 6 candidates, sometimes 8 candidates on average for most jobs. There could be more, there could be less, but on average, it's about 6. So if they get 100 applicants, 500 applicants, whatever it is, if you're applying online, they'll select about 6 to bring in for interviews. Okay. Now you were one of the 6. Great. Awesome. Okay. But if there's 6 people that were brought in for interviews, 5 are going home with a no. Okay. So statistically, you could be one of the 5. It wasn't about, you're not qualified. It was just they decided based on silly human flawed criteria that they wanted some other person instead. Right? And just so you know, don't feel too bad about this because it's a total crapshoot. I've had to be a hiring manager for many years. And I've also been on the other side of the table early in my career and in the mid kind of stages of my career. And it's a total crapshoot. It has nothing to do with you being qualified. Job interviews are about being likable, really. That's what they're about. Being qualified was the application stage. The only people they invite to interviews are people that, on paper, look fully qualified to do the job, right? So that's not the issue anymore. The only time that would be an exception is if they found out that you lied on your resume and you are, in fact, not qualified, right? That would be the only time when that would matter in a job interview. They're starting with the assumption that you are qualified. You could do the job. The question now is, do they want you to be the person to do the job or somebody else? You could do it, but do they want you to do it as opposed to somebody else, right? Now, if you go in there and, you're argumentative or you're just, you look like angry or it just doesn't click. Like, they say something to you and you misinterpret it. And then you say something back to them and they don't understand it. There's, some communication issues there, interpersonal skills, or just the culture difference. That's going to be a deal breaker, right? You're qualified, but that's why you didn't get the interview. Okay, so if you were called for the interview, you did an interview, but they didn't call you back. Number one reason, statistical probability. You're one of the 5 of the 6 that were sent away with a no. Okay. So what do? Nothing. You're doing everything right. Okay. You got the interview. As long as your interviewing skills are good, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Okay. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Okay. They were looking for someone that's extremely high strung, or they were looking for someone extremely mellow and calm, right? You have no way of knowing what they were looking for. You go in there, you could either be yourself or you could try and be some super version of you, but you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So it has to just magically align. Serendipitously, you just happen to have exactly what they were looking for. And that will happen for you. It's just random chance. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff with personality that they look for. Okay. Usually they're looking for the wrong stuff, just so you know. People, not me, but people that have doctors of business that work in universities that study this stuff, they found that out years ago. Job interviews are highly, highly ineffective for selecting the candidates that actually end up outperforming, right? This is what they have a ton of data on. Why do we do it? It's because there's no real alternative that's practical. There are other ways, but they're so labor intensive and expensive that they don't do them. So we're stuck with this. Okay, so they just happen to be looking for, personality elements. They might have hidden elimination criteria, stuff that they are actually looking for that they didn't tell you about. Maybe they're looking for someone who likes dogs. That was never mentioned on the job description, right? So you go down to the interview and they say, "Do you like dogs?" And, you say, yeah, I guess they're okay, but I don't have a particular affinity for dogs. I've never owned a dog. I have nothing against them, but, and they go, "Okay, no problem. Well, thanks for letting us know." And meanwhile, you've just eliminated yourself, right? It would be stupid why they would eliminate you on that type of question, right? But they do, because they have little wants, wills, and needs. And if you disclosed what you were looking for, people would game the system, right? They would all say that they were all dog lovers, whether or not they were or not. So that's why they didn't disclose that. There's no way to anticipate this stuff. There's no way to, to hack it or game it. It's just luck of the draw. So don't feel too bad. You're not doing anything wrong. The next time, you will come out on the right side of questions like that. It's just a matter of random chance. Okay. Risk aversion. Okay. Once again. Now, a big thing here is salary expectations, right? Everyone hates that question. You go down to the job interview and they say, what are your salary expectations? And, most people don't know how to answer, and they waffle and they give numbers and they give ranges. And, maybe some of them have done their research before and they find that the market price for that role in that region is a certain amount. So they say the market price, thinking that, that must mean that's what I'm worth, which it doesn't mean at all. In which case, unbeknownst to you, you said the wrong thing and they eliminated you based on that. Right? That's a whole topic in and of itself. Okay, I've got a video coming out soon where I talk about that. Their assessment of your qualifications changed. Okay, so on paper, it looked like you were qualified, but then they brought you in for an interview. They asked you a couple of questions about what you had on your resume. They said, this work experience here, this job you had here, what did you do in that role? And you say something completely not what they had understood that job was by reading your resume. So they go, okay. So you see, now they feel that you're not qualified based on hearing you talk about what you actually did, right? There's a chance that could be the reason. That's not usually the reason why people are eliminated, but it is technically a thing that does happen. Okay. The thing that complicates it is that they often use that as a kiss-off reason for your rejection when they do give you a reason. It's not genuine, but they got to say something, so they'll say that because it's safe. They can't reveal the real reason why they rejected you, and that was like, we were hoping, we were looking for somebody taller, right? Or we were looking for somebody a little bit more friendly that I had more rapport with, right? It's very hard to defend reasons why you don't hire someone because they all sound petty, right? So if they ever do give, first of all, they mostly don't give feedback. And when they do give feedback, it's usually misinformation. It's usually not the reason. And in which case they'll say something very safe, like this, okay? Okay, but the most likely reason is random chance. Now, what can you do? Those are some of the reasons why you might have been rejected after an interview. What can you do about this? Here's some things you can do. Okay, failure of soft skills. Work on your soft skills. That's what job interviews are all about. They're not about your technical qualifications. That's what the application stage was all about. This is about soft skills, okay? And you can see this when they end up hiring people that have the gift of gab and they've got a lot of charisma, but really, they're really not that qualified for the role. I'm sure you've seen that before. That shows you what goes on in this process. If you go in there and you're comfortable and you're friendly and you're enthusiastic and you're happy to be there and, you're essentially acting like their best friend and they love you, things go well for you usually. Okay? So work on your soft skills. That's the only thing you can really do, right? Okay, keeping in mind that there's probably in most situations, there's nothing you can do because it's just random chance. But on the off chance it isn't, these are some of the things you can do. Number one, work on your soft skills. Okay, work on being likable. It's the single biggest thing you can do. Maybe your appearance or your attitude, okay, was a little bit off. Like, you need to be more agreeable. Maybe you came a little bit across as a little bit arrogant when you were talking about your qualifications. Just a personal tip. Don't go down to a job interview and act really kind of arrogant. Oh yeah, I got this, I got that, I got this, I got that. So I'm in demand. Don't act like that. There's temptation to do that. I understand. I myself have done that in the past, to my shame. It's usually not the thing to do. It won't go well for you, okay? It's much better to be a little bit more humble, okay? You say what you have, and you say what you can bring to the table, but you're not too cocky about it, right? Acting like, oh, I'm a shoo-in for this, like you know what I mean? Don't do that. There's a fine line between making a pitch for yourself and feeling that you're valuable, but crossing the line into being a little too cocky and arrogant about it. Okay. So just what really helps is doing mock interviews with another person, friend or family member, anyone. It's better than rehearsing alone. Okay. Even if you got to resort to like a family member, it's still better than not doing mock interviews. Okay. Language barrier could be a thing. Okay. This is very real. I know what it's like to interview in not your native language. Okay. Can be very hard, especially if you're in a situation where you're moving to a new country or something like that. It's, but this is real. It's for practical reasons. It's not all about prejudice. There are practical reasons in there too. Sometimes there's prejudice, but sometimes it's legitimate, because if people can't understand what you're saying, that's a big hindrance to how effective you can be. Okay. Communication skills. This goes beyond any kind of language barrier. If you communicate to somebody what's going on, and you need to for your job, but at the end of that interaction, they're offended, or they're frustrated, or they're confused, that's not going to go over too well, okay? What you want is to communicate to someone in such a way that even if it's bad news or not what they were expecting, they still feel okay about you. They still feel okay about them and the situation, right? Because if every time someone has an interaction with you and it annoys them, things are not going to go well for you, okay, in the long run. It's not a good sign. So this is why we have to work on communication skills. Okay, you have to be polite. You have to respect etiquette, protocol, okay, that kind of thing. Okay, you have to have the right attitude, even if what you're doing sucks and is stupid and is pointless and is annoying and these people are off-putting. You still have to communicate with people in such a way that, they don't get like offended or angry every time they deal with you. Okay? A lot of technical people, they have a blind spot for this. This is the single biggest thing that gets them eliminated. Okay, is they just have this blind spot for how off-putting they are. You have to artificially overcompensate by being super polite and friendly. Okay? Even though in a job interview, you really don't feel like it because you're hating every moment of it and you think these people are morons, right? So you have to be able to do this on demand. You just have to. Okay? That could be a reason why this didn't work. You were qualified on paper, but their reaction was, after just meeting you, they were left with the impression, I don't want to work with this person. They're too sullen, they're too serious, they're too kind of off-putting. It feels like if I have a disagreement with them, they're going to get angry. Like I don't want that. Why would I want to work with a person like that? I want to work with people that are going to make me feel good. We all got to be here, right? I want to go home content at the end of the day, not like, berserk, not like so angry that I could just tear someone's head off. Okay, and then finally, the obvious thing is that you could have just given the wrong answers to questions, in which case it was due to unpreparedness. So, that's a no-brainer. You need to practice for job interviews like you would practice for anything else. Just being qualified for a job doesn't mean that you're going to interview very, very well. Interviews are something completely different from being qualified for a job. So maybe some of your frustration results from that. And if it does, I get it. It's stupid. The whole thing is really stupid, but you know, if you want to work within that system, you have to conform to that system. It's painful, but you know, hopefully you do the interview, you're qualified, and then you'll never have to see those people ever again. And your boss is awesome to deal with, right? It's a necessary evil. I will get to questions right after I finish this, which will be coming soon. Okay, so that's the second part of 3. That's if you were rejected from an interview. You got the interview, but then the process ended there. They did not call you back. That's what we were just talking about. Now we're going to talk about the third of 3, where this situation is where you applied for the job, you got an interview, you passed the interviews, however many there were, and you got an offer. So you got to the offer stage, but that's where the process ended for you. They either rescinded the offer or they did not call you back. Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, so usually the way this process works is you get, like some jobs, they have one round of interviews. In which case they talk to 6 people or so, and then they just offer the job to whichever one they prefer. What's common for a lot of jobs, especially at the professional level, like if you're above the entry level, okay, and you're at the worker level or the professional level or the management level, like especially the management level, but even at the professional level, the worker level, you may get more than one interview. It might be like a screening interview first, which is kind of quick and dirty. They ask you some basic stuff. And then you get a more in-depth interview, right? Sometimes the screening interview is done remotely. It's like on the phone or it's on, a Zoom call or something. Sometimes it's a physical face-to-face interview. Other times, you get a full-blown face-to-face interview first, and then they do it again, but with different people. So you have a second interview, but with more people or different people. I once had I got hired for like an executive job. I had 9 interviews. It's 9 interview process. So I got the job, but yeah, it can be ridiculous. Okay. But anyway, so you went through the interview process and they gave you an offer. They said, here's our conditional offer. What do you think? If you could just sign it. A lot of people will try to negotiate something. Right? Maybe you tried and it didn't work. So what's going on? Okay, the standard process for this is if there's more than one round of interview, usually they do something called a final 3. That is that maybe they do a first round interview, they bring in like 8 people or something, and then they'll do a second round interview where they bring in 3. So of the 8, they bring 3 back, and then they have their final 3. And of those 3, they extend an offer to one of them. Okay. That's usually when you're dealing with management jobs. That's also professional jobs usually do that. And any job where they bring in an external HR person, like an external recruiter or something, where the recruiter doesn't actually work for the company that you're that's hiring. Okay. So, and the reason for that is that interview at the end, where they have the final 3, that's attended by the client, which is the employer. The first interview, the employer is not there, it's just the recruiter, and the recruiter is acting like an agent. Okay? But you'll do the second round, which is the final 3. Now, what's going on there is that sometimes what they do is like they figure these 3 candidates, they're all contenders. We really don't have a problem hiring any of these 3. They could all do it. We're okay with all of them. Like it really doesn't matter too much between them because they're all good. But we only have one job up for grabs, so we have to extend an offer. So sometimes what they do is they'll offer their number 1 candidate. They'll say, here's the offer. Okay. Now, if that lead candidate tries to negotiate at all, some employers will say, okay, well, never, they won't get back to you. And instead, they'll extend the same offer to the candidate number 2. Now, if candidate number 2 says, we got a deal, and they sign it, here you go. then the employer says, okay, well, we're going to rescind the offer from number one because we got candidate number two. And candidate number two didn't want more money or more benefits or more sick days, or they just signed it. So we're going with them. Because all three of you people would have been fine. We don't mind. You're all qualified and we'd have no problem working with any of you. Okay, so sometimes you're up against that. That's a thing that happens, okay? Why weren't you number one? Random chance. You did nothing wrong. They just happened to be looking for some weird, quirky stuff and you didn't have it. Maybe they were looking for someone that they wanted to exploit. And for whatever reason, you seemed a bit too tuned in or a bit too savvy. They felt they couldn't really pull the wool over your eyes. So sorry, we're going to go with someone else. Right? You really have no control over this and no way of knowing. Okay? Personal preferences, highly illogical hidden elimination criteria. They're looking for all kinds. I did a video that's one of my most popular videos. It's got millions of views where I talked about a candidate being rejected because they were asked, what sports team of these two teams do you prefer? Now, unbeknownst to this candidate, the boss was a big fan of like Team B, right? But the candidate said, well, I like Team A. So in the absence of any other clear reason to eliminate these people, because they were all qualified, they said, okay, well, I'd prefer to work with someone who's rooting for the same team as me. Right? Silly, right? But that's what we sometimes encounter. So as I say, I mean, you've done nothing wrong. It's just this is the kind of thing that's going on behind the scenes, okay? There could be political stuff, okay? Sometimes the final three idea is used simply to make one candidate look better. They will contrast one or both other candidates against candidate number one that's really the one that everyone expects to get it. Right? The recruiter could have strategically placed candidates that don't look that good simply so it makes candidate one look better. That has been known too. It's a stupid thing. I mean, yes, it's things like this that contribute to this process being totally ineffective or highly ineffective. Okay, so there could be all kinds of political things going on there that you would have no way of knowing. You just stepped into it, right? You just walked into the situation, right? Okay, now let's talk about some things that you do have control over, okay? Everything I mentioned so far, it's out of your control. You're doing nothing wrong. Just keep on trucking. Keep on keeping on. Some of the things that you may be responsible for are the following. Okay, maybe you decided to play hardball with them over compensation. Okay, you tried to negotiate salary above their reservation price. Okay, reservation price is like your reservation price is the lowest you would ever accept for a job, and their reservation price is the highest they'd ever pay for a job. It's their limit, right? So if the highest they could ever pay for this job would be, say, 100, and you said, no, I need 120 or no dice, it's like, okay, well, it just, I'm sorry, it just doesn't work, right? We'd like to hire you, but we just can't. It's not that we won't pay you that. We can't pay you that. I'm sorry. So they go with someone else, right? So you have to be able to read the situation. And negotiation is a whole other topic. I'm not going to get into it here, but that could be a reason, okay? If you're desperate for a job, the conventional wisdom is don't negotiate. Just, if this is what they're offering, just accept it and send it back. Say, yeah, great, we got a deal, right? If it's really not good enough or not what you're wanting, then you can continue your job search while you're working for them, okay? That's the reality of it. Maybe you signaled back to them a lack of agreeableness. Okay, so what that means is that they give you an offer and you come back and you say, no, absolutely not. You know, this, I'm going to need this, that has to change. We're going to have to change that number. The benefits are unacceptable. Sick days are unacceptable. Use of company car and travel arrangements, that's unacceptable. Remote work is unacceptable. You're too argumentative. And they think like, okay, this seems like it's going to be a long, painful process. I'd rather not. We're just going to not, we're going to go with someone else that is a little bit more agreeable. Okay. So that is also a thing. Usually when you negotiate, you pick one, maybe two things. It's like, I'm going to need this, I'm going to need that. If you're okay, we got a deal. You make it easy for them. Okay. What can you do? You can just learn how to negotiate. Bone up on how to negotiate, how negotiation works. Okay. And that's the solution to that. But that's the end of that scenario. Okay. So we've covered 3 scenarios where you might be rejected: at the application stage, at the interview stage, and at the offer stage. So the recurring theme here is that the vast majority of the time you've done nothing wrong. It's just statistical probability. And incidentally, that's usually why you end up getting a job that works out, is statistical probability. You happen to show up at the right time, at the right place, and you just happen to have the little quirky, niggly things that these people just happen to be looking for, and you are the best candidate. And they offered it to you, and it worked out. Like, it just chance. Okay? This is a numbers game. And everybody gets rejected a lot. The secret is to have quantity. You have a lot of leads, a lot of opportunities, a lot of interviews. And for each thing that you try, you do a high quality application and interview and negotiation. Okay, it's like quality, it's quantity and quality at the same time. Kind of a tall order, I know, but that's the reality. Okay, take care of your mental health. We have no control over how we feel. Sometimes understanding what's going on behind the scenes helps, because you realize, like, you did nothing wrong. It's not that you're unemployable. It's not that you're doing the wrong things or you said the wrong things. It's just that these people are not looking for that. And they could be looking for something completely out to lunch, and that's what we see a lot. So don't feel too bad. Just make sure that you're doing the basic stuff correctly. Okay, so whatever stage it is that you're faltering at, do the things at that stage, like cover the basics, like I mentioned as I was going through this. Okay, so that's basically what's going on. Hopefully that was helpful to people. Hopefully, you're not feeling too bad. And the other thing I'll say is that if you tire of this silly process of applying for posted positions on the internet, where you apply with like a billion other people, you go through a recruiter who uses ATS software like to filter resumes so they may not even get to a human before they're rejected. And then you do these silly interviews with recruiters that don't know the first thing about the job that they're hiring for. And you got to go through rounds and rounds of interviews and all this kind of stuff. And you absolutely are sick and tired of this. First of all, you're not wrong to feel that way. You're absolutely right. Secondly, if you don't know it by now, there are alternatives. You don't have to go through this process to get a job. There are alternatives. For whatever reason, when I start talking about the alternatives, people tend to tune out. They're not interested. But I've done videos before on the hidden job market. I've done videos about networking. You don't have to go through this. The most common way that people get jobs is through networking. Now, don't take my word for this. If you don't agree with that, look it up yourself. If you go to the people that have jobs now and you ask them, how did you get your job? They're not going to say, I applied cold on the internet. They're going to say it was some form of networking. Either I have a coworker that worked here that recommended I apply, or I reached out to the company. They weren't hiring at the time. They didn't have a job posting, but I reached out to, the head of the department that does this, where they could employ someone like me. it'll be some variation of networking. So there's alternatives where you don't have to do this process if it's really not working for you. Okay. You should do it, but maybe do other things at the same time. And one of them will work out. And there we go. That comes to the end of this topic, this long-winded topic. Thank you very much for your attention.